Jackson, what just happened?
What?
Jackson. What the f?
Cousin blew the game. Oh my god.
Blew this game in an insanely I guess you can just rewatch the stream. I don't know why I'm filming this. This is just in the moment. He played.
Spoiler alert.
What's up, YouTube? So I'm at a Scrabble tournament in a hotel right now, and I just blew a game worse than I've blown a game in a really, really long time. And I thought, why not show you guys what it looks like when a champion level player throws just incredibly hard. I'm still getting nightmares from that game from 2 weeks ago, so let's use someone else's horror story to ease that pain. Back in 2018, the coastal city of Torquay, England hosted the World Scrabble Championships. The contenders played 35 games over 4 days, after which the top 8 players based on number of wins and point spread advanced to the quarterfinal bracket. Who ended up winning? I'll give you guys one guess and one guess only. Nigel Richards, indeed. With around 5 games to go, Nigel Richards had already guaranteed himself a spot in the top 8, so all of the focus was on everyone else at the top of the standings. Of course, round 35 was the most contentious of all, where many players were in must-win situations. So the stage was set, and 2 of the players risking elimination faced off in round 35. On one side, the American Chris Lipe, who was the runner-up in the 2014 World Championship. Chris's opponent, well, just the guy that beat him in 2014, Craig Beevers of England. Now that's an exciting pairing. So the game begins with Chris exchanging down to Z blank. Craig opens with Synovia, and Chris responds with Zit, which is a little bit dangerous, setting up an I, an E, and an S hook. Craig takes advantage with Javel, and Chris responds with Elongate. Craig plays Buoy, and Chris responds with Laicized and Synovias. Very nice find. And Craig plays Harp, which isn't actually that bad, keeping FNN, saving the NEF possibility to the left. And Chris takes a while here and plays Epicines, which is a very bizarre looking word, and gets an extra 5 points when Craig challenges it. Now Craig is behind by a lot, and he has to choose between playing Feint and Funds. He decides to block the E, which seems more dangerous. And Chris makes the first clear mistake of the game by playing Words instead of Drowse in the same spot for 6 more points. Craig responds with Voodoo, and Chris has some awkward letters, but wants to block that triple lane and plays Or. Craig responds with Began, and he's trying to mount a comeback. He's only down 30 now. Chris makes a really nice play of Huron, controlling the bottom right of the board very, very well. Whereas Craig responds with a high-scoring play of Kex, coming within 15 points of Chris. Now, Chris makes a very bad mistake. He has the possibility of playing Dementia through the E, and completely misses it and plays Maynard. Dementia is a very tough word to spot. Craig responds very forcefully with Umiax, a beautiful find through 2 disconnected tiles to almost tie the game up. And now there's 4 in the bag. So Chris has to deal with these really, really bad 1-point tiles and also contend with the fact that there are many threats. There are bingo threats through the EON of Huron, and there's a big scoring threat in the top right of the board. So he plays Attic to take a 29-point lead, hoping that he can still outrun Craig after a potential huge play on the top right. Notice how much time both players have. Craig has 11 minutes and 20 seconds left, and Chris is down to 4 minutes and 15 seconds. So Craig now has a full rack of tiles, and Chris also draws into a full rack of 7 tiles. Chris probably needs to draw 3 consonants here to give himself the best chance in the endgame. Unfortunately, he falls just short of that, drawing F-O-O-T. The commentators were following this game on an engine and quickly saw that Craig was in a winning position. 2 minutes in and Craig's already spotted his best endgame play, but he obviously wants to make doubly sure that everything is in order before shutting the game out. With 7 minutes to go, something very bizarre happens. Craig disappears from view. He leaves his seat. Now, that might not sound weird, but under Scrabble tournament rules, you are not supposed to leave your seat at all. The only exception to this is if you need to use the bathroom, and there is a full procedure in place wherein you have to make your play and not draw your tiles before leaving the board, thus minimizing cheating risks, since without a full rack of tiles, you don't really know what your options are. And to be honest, when I was watching this, I got really angry. It seemed like Craig was rubbing in the fact that he was going to win this game. But then it struck me that Craig was actually looking at the standings.
That's a bit of a
It's
over
an
the
interesting
top.
request,
Interesting
in, the
request.
Middle of, in the middle of a game.
Chris smiling at least, even though he probably knows he's not going to win the game.
So Craig maybe thought that he needed to win by a certain amount to make it into the top 8. People were very confused about this. And then he comes back to the table and he's like leaning over the board so he could probably see Chris's tiles from the other side. And although it is the end game, so both players should know what the opponent has, you're never supposed to be able to see your opponent's tiles. What if you made a mistake and you tracked the tiles wrong? You're basically cheating. But why was Craig doing this? It still didn't make sense. Poor Chris was just sitting there in a losing position, wondering why Craig wasn't just finishing him off. But as Craig's time dwindled even further, I started to think that there was something wrong. The observers had the benefit of knowing that this was a winning position, but you don't really know that you've won until you actually win. Craig could do the math properly, but maybe he missed a play. Or maybe the words that he's sure are valid are not valid. All Craig needs to do here is make one of many plays at the top right of the board and keep the right letters to make a high-scoring outplay next move as well. Of course, calculating a full endgame takes time. You have to consider what your opponent has, as well as consider what your possible sequences are. But everyone watching, especially the commentators, figured it was only a matter of time before Craig made a winning play.
Craig's just got to be really careful that he's not missing anything. Come on, Craig, don't make us wait 8 minutes.
It wasn't until when Craig had around 3 minutes left that I realized that there was a really good chance that this game was not going to end the way everyone expected it to for the past 10 minutes.
Do you think Craig's going to blow it? He's going awfully low on time.
2 minutes left.
Come on, Craig.
He's obviously thinking about girl.
Now getting to around 1 minute left, Craig was visibly fidgety and he started to panic. And then with only seconds left, he puts down girl. But not the girl that was winning the game in the top right corner. G-E-R-L. It was astonishing. This is not a word. But even if it is a word, or Chris accepts the play, he still has more than enough to win. All Chris needs to do after G-E-R-L is play something like finite, or the more stylish finito through the N of here on, and he has more than enough to win after a play in the top right corner. And if he wants to challenge, he can afford to do that. It only costs 5 points to do so. Chris will still have enough to win.
What's that?
G-E-R-L.
Why has he played a phony?
And that's all if girl is accepted or acceptable. But it's not, and Chris challenges it off and wins the game. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and so all I could think to do was take out my camera and click record. What the hell just happened? Natalie literally jinxed it. Oh my god. Okay. Chris, I love you. Craig Beevers had been eliminated from the 2018 World Scrabble Championship by Craig Beevers. Chris Lipe had had nothing to do with this. He was just sitting pretty with his My Little Pony ornament and colorful nail polish, while Craig Beevers had spent 12 minutes in what seemed to be a very trivial endgame to then play a phony four-letter word. Chris went on to play foot for 30. Craig responded with girl for 33. Chris dropped his I to block Zaris from the ZA. And Craig went out with ties. And after losing 20 points for going overtime by over a minute, the final score was 453 to 416 in Chris's favor. So what actually happened in this game? Why did Craig Beevers do what he did instead of playing the endgame as everyone expected him to play it? Well, believe it or not, this all happened because of two extremely simple math errors. The first one was Craig calculating that the play of foot actually scored 36 points rather than 30. The second was that Craig thought he was getting 8 points at the end of his sequence from Chris's rack, only realizing later that he was only getting 6. So let's put all of this into context over the board. First, let's look at what would have happened if Craig had played GRRL on the first move, and Chris plays foot. Craig doesn't have to go out. He can just play Denise. Chris will play E-Day to block the S-hook on Javel. And Craig will go out with Zari for 17 and win by 8 points. If instead Chris tries to block with Fet, Craig will just go out with idents for 20 and he'll win by 7 points. The optimal response to girl is to play footy for 26, after which Craig has to go out if he wants to win, and he plays Zaris and wins by 4. This is the optimal sequence for both players. The problem for Craig is that he thought that Chris was getting 6 extra points for foot. But even if that's the case, this sequence here will still win the game by 2 points, according to Craig's math. But he just didn't see that far ahead. To this day, what strikes me the most about what happened here is after the game, the commentators interviewed both Chris and Craig. Chris was in utter shock. He couldn't believe that he had won that game. He was sure he was going to lose. And Craig, on the other hand, appeared very, very stoic.
No.
I miscounted it on two sort of separate different things. I'd counted foot as 36 instead of 30, which was the main bad thing to do.
Right.
Because that instead of winning by 4,
Yeah.
which I think was the sequence, I played
Right.
girl and then I have
Okay.
Zaris with an eye blank.
Okay.
I knew that sequence. I'd seen it pretty much straight away. And I'd counted foot as 36. And I'm not sure how I counted it as 36.
Right. Okay.
And then I sort of factored in, well, somehow I'd managed to consider that he had 4 tiles on his rack after he played 4 off and left 3.
Okay.
So then I'd overscored his move by 6 and underscored his count back by 2 to basically leave a situation where, according to my bad mathematics, I was going to tie.
So you thought you were heading for a draw? Okay.
And then like I sort of realised towards the end, then, oh no, he's actually has 4. He's going to have 3 tiles on his rack, not 4. And then so I was like, so now I was like panicking, trying to think, well, I've got to try and block it.
Yeah.
I've done it before. I always, it wasn't a situation I can miscount any close game. It's the table situation didn't make much difference in that respect. It was the fact that I do tend to miscount a lot at the end.
Right. Okay.
In close games, I've done it loads of times.
I didn't understand this at all at the time. This didn't seem to be a champion's mindset. Craig hadn't even looked over the game, but he assured himself and the commentators that the only reason he lost was because he made a math mistake. That's not true. And let's talk about this math mistake. Math mistakes happen, but when you have 12 and a half minutes to work everything out, you have more than enough time not only to recount everything, recount again, just make sure everything is right, especially if you think that you make math mistakes all the time. Craig had ample time to figure everything out. He didn't have the scores wrong, but even if he did, he could have gone all the way back, counted the entire game, and he still would have had enough time to work things out. But instead of that, he decided that he had calculated everything properly, and he got up to look at the standings because he thought he was tying the game. It's insane to me that Craig managed both to blow this game, but also to convince himself that it wasn't such a big deal. So I really want to ask the crowd, because am I being too harsh here? I've blown my fair share of endgames, but every single time it's been because I had no time left. Craig had half of his time left in the final position. He put on a clinic for how to manage your time in a Scrabble game. Both players did that, actually. At the end of the day, if some mid-range expert player did what Craig did here, I wouldn't bat an eye. But the difference between your average seasoned player and world champion Craig Beevers, that difference is night and day. If this happened to me, it would haunt me for months and years for the rest of my Scrabble career. But it doesn't seem to have fazed Craig Beevers. And maybe that's a weakness of mine. Maybe I need to be more forgiving of my own mistakes. Maybe that's the way to have a champion's mindset. As a champion, I feel like you need to be your own worst critic. And even though you know deep down that you're one of the best, you need a growth mindset. You need to continue to strive to improve. So do I feel better now having talked about this? Am I ready to show you guys my worst choke, potentially of all time? Well, the game that I mentioned at the beginning of this video is super embarrassing, which is why I'm only posting it to my Patreon. So if you really want to see my worst choke ever, I'll post the link to my Patreon in the description. That's about it for now. Thanks for watching, everyone.